Good afternoon, everybody. It's Mark Bradley here. Today, we're going to talk about design build estimates. So we're going to jump right into things here and save the questions to the end. So if you have anything that pops up along the way, just save that for the end and we can come back to it. So this is going to be a little bit in depth. I'll try to keep it moving along pretty fast without going too fast. So to start with, we're going to just kind of work off of a drawing here, and we're going to quote a portion of the job here. We're going to say from this sort of line here back, we're going to quote. So we'll kind of act as though this is a phased in project, and this backyard piece is going to be what we're going to prepare a price for today. So we've got a planting plan. We've got a flagstone patio to go in here. We've got a little section of metal work to prepare for a sculpture. And then we're going to quote landscape lighting and irrigation as well. So we're going to work up a quote for this job, and we're going to really kind of focus on using templates. And I'm going to kind of talk through how templates work and why there's so much of an advantage when quoting this type of work. Kind of takes the guesswork out for newer estimators or designers, and allows a more experienced person to build the logic into your system and create your own sort of production rates. So we're going to get started here. I'm going to build a new estimate. So I'm just going to go over here and click new. Going to use this McCoy residence job site. And now what's going to happen is it's just going to launch the first pane. Those of you who estimate with LMN currently are familiar with that. I'm going to update the sales and estimating role both to myself here. I'm going to say that I'm highly confident in this job, so that when I look at my pipeline in the CRM, I have a good idea of what I've got coming through. Now, if I wanted to measure the job site, I can always click the measure site or map site here. But I have a drawing, and I'm going to kind of work off of that. So I've already done the takeoff on the drawing, so we're not going to get into measuring and that kind of thing today. We're just going to have a go at creating the estimate. So we're not really going to focus on takeoffs. So the first thing I'm going to do in my estimate is I'm going to go into my work areas and pricing. Once I get in here, I'm going to start to add the work areas. So the way that I personally like to estimate, I like to kind of include mobilization and removals before I get into my work when I'm doing an install project. And again, it kind of depends on the size and scope of the work, but for a job site like this, I would definitely approach it that way. So first off, what I would say is I need to mobilize. So I'm going to create a mobilization item. And when that item opens up, the first thing I'm going to do, because I have templates set up, and that allows me to price my work a lot faster, I'm going to go into my estimating library. I'm going to go to templates. I'm going to find my mobilization template. Once I've got that up, I'm going to, considering the site, I've obviously been there, I've worked on the design, so I have a good understanding of what I need to sort of bring to the site. And I think that is going to probably take one person 10 hours. And I'm going to say that the ideal vehicle for that is going to be the larger truck and trailer to get everything there. And I've got the crew truck built into my template, but in this case, I'm not going to use it, so I'm just going to delete that one. I've got permit fees built into the template, but for this project, I'm not going to have them. So again, I'll delete that. I've got my safety fence here, and I know I'm going to need about 30 feet of fence to block off the back section where I'm going to use for access. So I'm going to include that here. I'm going to include a washroom. I'm not going to need a lot of site storage, so I'm just going to take that right out. I'm going to add in an 8-foot container to have on site for job site storage. I'm not going to need an office. It's not a big enough project. And I've kind of looked at it now and I've got everything here. It's important to note how much mobilization actually costs. I think often contractors kind of leave this off the list when pricing a job. And I think the important part here to note is you can see the cost of just getting this job site set up is just over $1,000. My break even with overhead recovery at 1,200, and I'm going to price this component at 1,400. Important thing is, if you're not quoting mobilization and you're doing this and just kind of hoping that you're charging enough, you may not be. So just a quick note here, but mobilization is certainly an important thing to think of. So I'm going to close that. Now I'm going to add my next work area, and this one I'm going to call removals, because on this project there is some existing plant material and patio stones that I need to take out. So I'm going to go back in, and once again I'm going to rely on my template to kind of expedite this. I don't want to have to build this up one item at a time, so I'm just going to find my demolition and removals template. It pops in, and again, the first thing I'm going to do is kind of look at labor. In this case, there's not a lot to do, so I think I could probably do it on the first day of construction. If I'm going to go there with a crew of 3, I think the first sort of 2 to 3 hours would be spent there, so I'll put in 10 hours. And if I'm there with a 3-man crew, the truck should also be assigned for 3 hours. The equipment's going to be needed. And I do think I'm probably going to end up filling one disposal bin with those things that we're going to discard. So again, we want to include removals as a line item because you can see here the total cost here is another $1,000. And again, I think often contractors don't think about mobilization and removals in enough detail, and it's kind of overlooked a lot of times. And often a good chunk of the profit can be lost on these first 2 things when you're getting in and started on a job. So I want to always kind of think of those as individual items. Now I'm going to sort of get into the nuts and bolts of the job. So first up, I'm going to look at the drawing. Now, as I said, I've already done a takeoff here, and we're just bidding on this little section of patio down here. This other section has been previously installed. So we're just really kind of working on this backyard section. Now, the flagstone patio is 550 square feet. This section, we're going to plan on laying it dry, which means we're not going to put in a concrete foundation or mortar. So we're just going to use a gravel base. So I'm going to go back to my estimate, and I'm going to open up a new work area just by clicking here. I'm going to call it the flagstone patio. That's going to open up a new work area for me. And again, I'm going to click into my library. And you know, if this was the first time I was ever building a patio, I might want to put together an estimate, picking my labor, equipment, and material components separately. But I've built these many times and I've templated it. And if you haven't started using templates yet, this is the biggest opportunity to save time and gain accuracy while estimating, as well as kind of systemizing that process so that other people can quote using the logic that you've put into the system to avoid making mistakes on prices. So I'm going to go into templates, and I'm going to look for my flagstone template, and I've got a dry laid one right here, so I'm going to choose that one. Now, I've set this one up a little bit differently in that it has production rate calculators built into the system. These are very easy to set up, and quite often, you know, you've got your own sort of rates that you like to use. In other words, you know that your crew plants one tree every 3 hours, or they lay 100 square feet of pavers per hour. There might be different rates that you've got in mind. We've got some built into the system here, and we're adding more all the time. So here's the installation labor on this one is 6 square feet per hour. That's including base and everything for this flagstone. And I'm going to say I did the takeoff on the flagstone at 550 square feet. So it's calculated some hours here for me. Now my crew truck, if my crew is going to be there for 90 hours and it's a 3-man crew, then I'm going to add my truck hours accordingly. Same with my skid steer. I think we're going to take 3 days to lay the patio. On the clean fill disposal bin, I'm going to use the calculator again because I don't want to have to get a calculator out manually and do this. So it's going to calculate automatically how many clean fill bins I'm going to need. If I'm going to put fabric down, I'm going to enter the 550 square feet there. My gravel, again, is going to calculate using a calculator. So I'm going to enter that square footage. It's going to calculate my stone base, my sand. If I'm going to use an edge restrainer, I can go ahead and update that, or maybe I'm not going to, and I can just simply delete. My sweeping sand. And if I'm going to get a delivery, I might know what that fee is from my typical supplier, or maybe we're going to pick it up, but I always like to use delivery fees wherever possible. And if it's $200 to have the stone delivered, I'd be way further ahead to do that than pay my own staff to do that. And we know that we're going to put in 550 square feet, but I want some waste, so I'm going to go ahead and update that. And now I can kind of get a quick look right here at my cost and the price to the customer and kind of get a feel for how things are looking. And then if there's something where I thought I could make more money, let's say I got a great deal on this stone and I was paying $5 the square foot, maybe I bought it direct from a quarry and got a great deal. I might want to capitalize on that rather than give it away. If I know that the supplier, the landscape supplier, sells it for $9, I'll put the normal price in and get my 35% profit here, so I don't just straight pass that through to the customer. So it's always very easy to do that. And then also, if there's something where you feel that you could charge a bit more money, you could always just override the profit as well and click and change that at any point and adjust your pricing that way. So we've got the flagstone patio priced. Again, work area templates really kind of make this fast and simple and take all the installation rates that a more experienced estimator or the owner has developed and kind of put those into play so everybody else can use them. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to price the garden beds, because I need to build these garden beds all the way around, and the soil needed to be excavated. It was poor soil, needed to be replaced with fresh soil and put in order to start planting. And of course, I want to include the soil and mulch and everything all quickly in that bed construction line item. And I'm going to just call that garden beds. And I'm going to quote that up really the same way I did with the other items. I'm going to go straight to my template. It's going to make things nice and fast. Going to find the right template, planting bed preparation. I've got equipment access, so that's going to work perfect for this one. And now I'm just going to kind of go down the list. And again, I want to use a production rate calculator to speed things up and kind of take the guesswork out of the estimating for somebody who might not be as experienced. So I've looked at the area to cover, and it's 580 square feet this time. So I'm going to just update my labor and my equipment. So I've got the right number of hours to go ahead and do that work. I know I'm going to use my mini excavator to do that. I'm going to need a disposal bin. Actually, I'll need 3. I'm going to need some soil. I need some mulch. Again, just updating the quantities here and letting the system do the work. So I've worked up my price now to build up these garden beds, the labor, material, and equipment required to dig out the beds and install the soils. Now I've got planting up next. I got to go back to my drawing. I've got a plant list here. It's pretty simple. And, you know, the way that every company bids a little bit different. And, you know, there isn't really a right and wrong way to approach this. Personally, I've always thought that it's efficient to quote trees, shrubs, and flowers separately. I just feel that, you know, there's different equipment requirements, and I think it's sometimes easier for the customer to kind of digest where the plant budget's going. So, you know, you may want to itemize everything or you may not, but in any case, I think having a little bit of breakdown helps. So I'm going to go over to the estimate again, and I'm going to open up a new line item. And this time I'm just going to call it planting, but I'm going to note that it's the trees. And that's going to make it easier for me to quote it. And I think, as I said, easier for the customer to understand. Same thing when I get into quoting, I'm going to go into my library. First thing I'm going to do is go to my templates. I'm going to find my tree planting template. When I open up that template, it's going to kind of immediately make it easy for me to update just based on the number of trees that we're going to plant. So back to the drawing. How many trees are we going to plant? Pretty simple here. I've got 10, 13, 18, 19 trees. So I'm going to go back to my template. And now all I have to really think about is how many trees. So I know I've got 19. I'm going to update my equipment accordingly. This time I'm going to use my cat excavator, and I'm going to use a power wheelbarrow to get the trees into the back. But I'm going to want that skid steer for loading and moving them around as well. So I've worked up a price here without really thinking too much about all of the little details. I've got all of my labor, equipment to do the work. Now I just need to add the actual trees. Now, obviously we can't template that, so we're going to go into our library. So I'm going to go into the material library and back to the list here. The first one, I've got 4 hemlock, and then I've got 6 cedars. So I'll go into my library, hit search, hemlock. I'm going to search up hemlock. There they are. I'm going to put, I think it was 4 hemlock. And I'm going to add cedar. And there was 6 of those. Back up to my drawing. I've got 3 katsura and 5 kusa, Cornus kusa. Search up katsura. I think it was 3. And I would think it was kusa. Puso was 5. And then I've got a redbud. So I'm going to search up redbud. And again, you can always add your library from the nurseries that you supply. We can always help you out with that. It's a pretty easy process. So now we've got all the trees in the system. So I'm just going to save that line item. Now my tree price is in. I've got a nice healthy profit on there. Next up, I might want to do shrubs. I'm not going to bore you with doing more planting pricing, but same thing with shrubs. I would get into next. I'll just quote up irrigation because personally, I think, if you're going to do any planting, you need to put an irrigation system in if you're going to warranty. There's just too much risk otherwise. The type of people that buy landscaping are often also too busy to maintain it. So irrigation goes hand in hand. And again, whether you're doing this in-house, you might template it that way, or if you're using a subcontractor, you can template it that way. Either way, it's going to work. I'm going to use a template knowing that I use a subcontractor, and it's already set up per zone. So I'm just going to say, I think we're going to add 2 new zones to the system. And that's all I'm going to need to update. Since my supplier has a price already and I've got a pass-through price. Now maybe I might want to bump the profit. That's a pretty easy thing to do here as well. Simply just clicking the profit override button here. Now that's got the irrigation price done. Again, if you do your own irrigation, you're going to build a template with your labor, material, equipment, and parts all built in so that you can quote those fast, kind of like what we've done with some of the other line items here. And a good example of that would be landscape lighting. So I'm going to kind of show the landscape lighting system. I always find that they add enormous amount of profit, and they don't take terribly long to put in when you're there doing a new project as well. So great opportunity for an upsell or even an add-on service later. But I'm going to go into templates. I've got landscape lighting built into the system, so it's pretty easy for me to quote nice and fast. And I'm going to say, first I want to look at how many lights I'm going to put into the project. So I've already kind of done that takeoff on the drawing, and I know that there's 6 up lights, there's 2 down lights, there's 4 path lights, and that's going to kind of tell me what size transformer I want. So I'm going to go ahead and put in a 300 watt transformer, and I've got all the transformers in here. So I'm going to delete the ones that I don't need, but it's always nice in your templates to delete rather than hunting things down. I'm going to need 140 feet of wire. And now this tells me I've got my total number of fixtures in here now. So I know that I've got 12 fixtures. So my install labor, again, I've got this in the system already. So if I enter that I'm going to install 12 fixtures, that's going to calculate the labor automatically using the template. And this is where it gets much easier for a designer or estimator or salesperson to quote this kind of work who may not necessarily have the experience to assign the labor. So it's important to get your template set up with these production rate calculators to kind of take the guesswork out of pricing things like this. So, very quick quote there for landscape lighting. It's a $3,200 upgrade to the sale with a 37.2% profit. Again, lighting is super profitable. It's usually pretty easy to sell, and it really does kind of add a completely different dimension to the garden. And let's face it, lots of times people are enjoying the garden at night as much as they are through the day with the kind of busy lifestyles that people live. And then last on the drawing here, there was a sculpture thing on on the drawing, and we need to supply this Corten frame. Now, that might not be a service you do, but it's probably something that a metal fabricator could do for you. So we're going to take that project on as well, so that we're kind of one-stop shop, and we'll just call that the sculpture preparation. And here I'm just going to go straight to my catalog again. I'm just going to go to my subcontractors. I'm going to find my metal fabricator. I've taken a quote from the metal fabricator on this already, and I know that their price is $480 to prepare this piece, and I want to make some profit on that. So I'm going to put my markup on, and I think I'll even bump it a bit because I think I can. And then there's going to be some time associated with this. So I'm going to put my install labor, and I'm going to need a truck to go pick it up and put it in. So I'm going to put that in. Now, I think that's going to probably end up taking the better part of a day for one person, and then maybe even a little help from the rest of the crew once they get there. So I'm going to just manually say it's going to be 10 hours work, and the truck's going to be 8 hours. And I've got my metal fabricator already built in. So I've got a price now for that sort of one-of type feature, something that we're not going to template because it's just something we're building once. So I'm going to save that. And now I've got my quote put together, and I'm pretty confident in everything that I entered, but I want to review it and make sure that the profitability is as good as it can be. And also want to kind of look and say, does this seem right, this 214 hours? So if I'm going to do this job, is it fair to say that a crew of 4 on a 50-hour week can go in and take care of this project? I'd be very confident that we could do this in that time frame. And obviously I'm using templates based on my company numbers, and everybody should build their own. But basically what I want to do is now look and say, what does that actually shake out in comparison with my budget? So I'm going to look at my analysis tab here on the top, and that's just going to kind of give me an overview of how the job is going to trend compared to my budget. And I want to really look and make sure that it's just profitable enough for us to pursue at this price point. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to kind of look first and say, well, there's a 33.5% gross profit with a net profit of 24.2. It's going to produce $147 per man hour. And the budget that I'm working off of only showed $90 per hour. So that tells me that this project is going to outperform my budget for every hour my staff is working. And this is super important. When you start bidding jobs, if these are ever underperforming your budget, you have to really look closely at whether or not it's a good idea to do the work, because it's going to cause you to fall short on your sales and overhead recovery goals. So anytime it sort of exceeds that, it's a good job. And in this case, it's a really good job. So I kind of come over here, I have a quick look. My budget gross profit was only 27.9. This one's 33.5, so that's super positive. And my profit forecast was 14.4, and this estimate is going to produce 24%. So super good job all around, provided we're confident with the hours that we bid, and we know that we can get the job done on time. So I've kind of analyzed the job. I can go back in to the estimate and add specific notes about any of the specific work areas. Maybe there was some special questions or something that needed to be addressed. I could note within the flagstone patio, for example, I've got some standard items here. I could note here, a pattern. Maybe they've indicated that they wanted a 5-size random square cut pattern. I might want to just clarify that in here as part of my sales. And I, obviously write something a little more thoughtful, but very easy to go in and add those. And then in your crew notes, you could do the same. You could kind of describe things that they might need. And we've got some standards put in here of checklists and installation specs. But again, you may want to go in here and make a note what those 5 sizes are and what that pattern is. Or you could always attach details into the project file section as well here. But the big thing that I wanted to kind of review today was just how powerful these templates really are. And, when you're in the work and you're quoting things, I think when you go through the process of building one once, it becomes very easy to kind of template and do this kind of thing on an ongoing basis. So take the time to build the templates as you go. And if you're not sure how, I'll kind of review that here quickly as well, just in a few minutes. But the easy thing to really think of is right here, if I built a flagstone patio once, I can always just go back into that item, copy it, or save it as a template if I haven't done that before. So that's a sort of a fast way, once I've built an item up one step at a time, to template it. And that way it's there in your template library the next time that you start to bid work. So the next thing that I would be doing as part of this process is I would be preparing a quote for the customer. So I'm going to save the estimate. I'm going to go to my customer proposal. Now I've got all kinds of options in here, things that I can hide and add and show the customer or not show the customer. But I'm going to kind of leave it simple here. And this proposal is going to come up and show mobilization with my description. And these are kind of my standard descriptions. I didn't go in and make a lot of changes, as you could see. My removals, my description of my flagstone patio. So I'm preparing my presentation package now. I've got my price kind of broken down for each area. Irrigation, my landscape lighting system. I want the customer to kind of get as much detail as possible without really giving them so much that they start to analyze every line. So I've got a package price, and I've given them enough breakdown so they can see how we got there. Then we've got our payment terms, our exclusions, procedures for charging for extras so that there's no surprises along the way and what that looks like, warranty and breakdown of material tolerances so that they understand that we're working with natural products. And then we've got a sign off. So pretty simple here. Now files, I would store the drawing, any specifications, maybe details, construction details, anything that the crew is going to need to produce the work out in the field. And that way, when the job starts, they can access it from their phone through Element Time, and everything's always stored nice and neat here in the customer file. I said I'd go back to templates, and I think that's something that really, I've obviously showcased as we were building the quote. It's important that you kind of know how to do that for yourself. So I'm just going to go down here into the item catalog. And if you've never built a template before, this is how it's done. If you're not sort of copying out of the estimate. So as I had said earlier, once you've built something once, you can always just add it here as a template by saving it as a template, or you can kind of build it within the library. So we're going to build it in the library here. I'm going to go to templates. And I've got a whole list of templates already in the system here. But I'm going to kind of pick one that's in here, and I'm going to just copy it and modify it so that you kind of see what that process looks like. And I'm going to use flagstone dry lay here as an example. So I'm going to open that one. And whether it was new or I'm copying one to modify it, which I'm about to do, I would start on this general page. What I'm going to do is hit copy, and we're going to actually create a new one. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this flagstone, and this time I'm going to say wet installation. And so I'm going to say I want to look at my items, and now my items are all in here to do flagstone, and this time I'm going to be pricing it with some mortar. So I'm going to make some changes because everything changes when you start installing flagstone on mortar. So I'm going to say my installation labor is going to change. So I'm going to click on my production rate, and whether it's a new template or you're adjusting one like I am right now, this is your opportunity to kind of take that expertise that you have and bake it into the system so that other people can quote efficiently in your absence. So I could lay 6 square feet per hour, per man hour, and this was including base and preparation and everything. But I know that when I lay on mortar, that pace slows down a little bit because there's a little bit more work involved. So I'm going to kind of adjust that down to 4, and I'm going to say that's going to obviously increase my pricing. Now, along my crew truck is going to be adjusted. In this case, I like to update it manually. All of the base preparation is not going to change at all. The square cut, not going to change. So what really kind of changed was the labor in this case. So the way of calculating any of these line items on an automatic basis is to hit the production rate. So in this case, I clicked on the gravel. And so you've done the math at some point in time, and if you don't know how to do the math, we have some good calculators built into the systems library. But what we're saying here is for every 200 square feet, we're going to need 3.7 tons of gravel at the specified depth. So your depth may be different. Places where there's frost or no frost, the depth is always kind of different on base. But in this case, we're showing a 12-inch gravel base, so the volume might be a little bit higher. But the key thing here is build your production rate so that you don't need to calculate gravel manually every time you do a job. That way you're just updating the square footage and the system is calculating the gravel volume for you. So this would be sort of a modification on an existing one. Now, obviously, if I'm going to get precise and actually use this as a template, I have to add a few things into the system. So I go into my library and I look to see if I have mortar. I don't have mortar into the system. So I'll go ahead for the first time and add that. Add that item. All right. Okay, so we've got flagstone wet installation, and now if I were to go into my quote, I could go back into my estimate and I could use that item if I wanted to price that job and change it, let's say from dry to wet, or even just give them an option on that type of installation. So here we are with a completed quote, and I've done my analysis. I've printed off my estimate. Other things that might happen that in your company that you might want to do is you may want to create purchase order for the materials. You might want to create some crew plans. And the nice part with the estimating software is it really gives you that opportunity to kind of create all kinds of different reports to do the job. So in this case, there's a purchase order that we've got with all the materials, and you can always break those out and send them to different suppliers. If, let's say, you use different suppliers for plants versus stone versus lighting, but you can build these quick material lists. You may want to create a job planner for the crew just to kind of keep them up to date. And some people like having these printed. Obviously, you can save these in the file section to be accessed on the phone, but this kind of breaks down the job for the crew in a way where they can see all the labor, material, and equipment that was planned, along with any tool checklists or details that you might have embedded in the system. And you might have some descriptions of the work worked in as well, and those are all customizable. But I would like to hand this to the crew with a job packet, or save it to the file section if you want to be completely paperless. In either case, it really gives the crew all of the information to execute effectively, and they understand how long each component of the job should take so that they can kind of execute the work in the same sort of mindset that it was priced. So there's all kinds of different things you can do in the reports, material lists, purchase orders, job planners. You can also quote the job many different ways as well. If you'd like to show more detail or less detail, you can kind of really play around with that. But that was all the information I was hoping to cover today. So we can kind of move on to questions if anybody has any.
Hey, Mark, thanks for that. We've got quite a few questions that have come through. So the first one, do you ever adjust your overhead numbers when you're estimating? If so, when do you do that? And would you recommend it to others?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, kind of an advanced estimating topic, but I can answer it quickly. If I was bidding, let's say today, I'm $1 million company. So I've got $1 million budget for this 2020 year, and midsummer I get a call from a property manager that offers us to bid on a $500,000 snow contract. And in the past, I was only doing maybe 200,000 in snow. So this is going to kind of add to that 200, another 500, which would make me a $1.5 million company. When that happens, if I actually get the job, my overhead drops exponentially because I've now grown by $500,000, which has a big impact on my overhead. So sometimes what I've done in the past, particularly when bidding big jobs and big opportunities, is I've created a duplicate of my budget and added the revenue, labor, any additional equipment and material into that budget to see what my overhead would be based on having that huge job. And that has helped enormously because, overhead recovery for a typical company in the industry is about 25% if they're in that sort of $1 million range or under. But often when you start to grow, that overhead begins to fall pretty quickly if you're kind of managing, the middle management sort of waste. And what I mean by that is if you don't start adding a lot of middle managers, you get a lot more savings on overhead recovery. So I think, having that duplicate budget mindset is good for big jobs only. The other thing that I think is smart is to have, for any division that does more than $1 million in sales, definitely bid with divisional budgets. So in this case, I'm bidding with a company budget. You can see here, I could very easily click this and change the budget and say, I want to bid this with my snow division budget if that was, if I was going to bid snow. And when I do that, it automatically updates all of the pricing and markups accordingly. So if you do want to bid with another budget, this is where you click to change.
That's great. Mark, we saw about our masonry and our irrigation work. What's a typical healthy markup to tack on to subs?
Well, when you're in I think I've got irrigation here as an example. So what happens naturally with LMN is we're putting overhead recovery on, plus we're adding profit. Now, I've always kind of said if you're dealing with legitimate subcontractors, like actual companies, they've already put overhead recovery in and a healthy profit. So you may not have a lot of room to add more. But if you're dealing with sort of a smaller operator who's, maybe a stonemason with his own truck, charging you an hourly rate or a day rate, they might not be charging a lot for overhead recovery. So you may be able to get a bit more. And also, the other big factor is how much management is involved in taking care of that contractor and the client. So, in the case of irrigation here, I felt that I could bump the profit a little bit on these two zones and get 20% profit. So your standard profit margin will always come up under subs here at 14.4 in this case. And I just kind of quickly push that override and put 20 on. Now, I could say, I think I could get 30. The price to the customer is 2,700. That's getting a bit expensive for two zones of irrigation. So I'd probably try to, look at market pricing and make sure that I kind of stay within somewhat of a market price. And I think that's kind of the only way to look at those markups on subs. But as with anything, always get as much as you can, and never give it away for less than your overhead recovery and profit. Otherwise, you might as well let them deal direct.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Here's another one. How have you found profitability between bidding time and material on design build work with a more traditional estimate proposal?
I've always found time and material works really well. It eliminates the risk. What I would typically do is still work up an estimate to give the client sort of a sense of the budget. But often, if there's a lot of unresolved details, designs, if it's a bigger property, where, the customer wants to kind of think through it as they're maybe building a new home or developing the property, I've found time and material works extremely well on the profit side. And what you do there is basically very similar to what the system's doing, is you give them your material prices, including overhead recovery and profit, and then give them a rate card for your labor, material, and equipment. And personally, I find it's very profitable. There's no extreme spikes in profit, but there's zero risk. And I just feel like your profit is kind of stable going into the project, and the customer tends to get a little bit better product because you're less rushed. And I think the relationship is better because you can be very transparent from start to finish on the project. And I think it, provided you're still holding your team accountable to efficient work habits and installation rates, then everybody comes away happy.
I think you hit part 2 of that question already on the sales process, so we won't cover that off. I think you've covered it there. Where do you factor the possibility of warranty work into your pricing?
Warranty is built in a few places. When you're pricing materials and when you're creating materials in your item catalog, I'll just open up the item catalog here for a minute. When you're in the material section, there's a I'll just open up the first item that pops up. So this is just a plant. So 2 gallon, I've got my cost, a shipping factor, and a warranty factor. Now on plants, I tend to put a warranty factor in here. And I like to try to accommodate for some additional labor later. So what I've always kind of done myself is a 15% warranty factor on all plants, even though we tend to lose 3 to 5%. And that kind of gives us a little bit of a room on the for labor later. What I haven't done this, but I've seen a lot of companies do, is actually create within the estimate. So back to the estimate, create a warranty template and actually charge for warranty as a service. So they go ahead and actually create a work area called warranty and apply that as a line item to the quote. I think that's a good idea. I think, you know, customers may push back a little bit on it, but I think if it's explained properly in the sales process, it's not a bad way to do it. But personally, where I've recovered the bulk of that cost has always been in my budget. So I'm actually not building warranty in specifically throughout the estimate as much as I am in my budget. And that way, my markups on everything I do throughout the year recover that labor. And the materials, as I've shown you, I've kind of built into the system. So when I'm building my budget for the year, under overhead, I've always added a warranty labor line item. And that way I'm kind of recovering that time throughout the year. And you can very easily create a warranty account for your staff to clock in and out of on LMN. And anytime they do warranty work, they clock in there. And then at the end of the year, you know what you spent on warranty labor, and you can kind of factor it into your budget next year at the same, or even maybe a bit more if you're planning some growth. And that way, every job you do throughout the year is kind of shouldering that cost.
That's great, Mark. And we've got one more question here for you. I often lose jobs because I'm the only person who prices work and can't get back to leads fast enough. It's difficult to manage my time because I'm still out in the field the majority of the day. Do you make it a daily routine or set aside time on some sort of frequent basis strictly for pricing work?
Yeah, I think that's, you know, that's a big, a common problem. We've all kind of walked up to a customer's house and heard them say, hey, you know, I've met with 5 people and nobody's even gotten back to me with a price, or, you know, I phoned 10 contractors and only 1 showed up, or you're the only one that's shown up so far. And, you know, that's kind of music to my ears when I'm out selling, because I've always thought, you know, it's yours to lose as soon as they tell you that. And, you know, this day and age, I think more than ever, people have really sort of come to expect a very high level of service, and we're used to getting pricing very quickly over the internet. So I think, you know, creating the block time to get your pricing done quickly is probably one of the highest return on time invested in your business. So, you know, I'm a big believer in block time. If every day, you know, you start the crews in the morning, and, you know, once things are running along efficiently, you maybe step back every day at kind of, you know, 11, sometime between 11 and 1, and you kind of work on the business as opposed to in it. You know, for me, one of the most important things of working on your business is really taking a personal approach to estimating, because that's where your opportunity is to kind of wow the customer with the turnaround time on estimates, but also it's your opportunity to value engineer your prices, to build a really good sound plan so that the job can go smoothly and make a strong profit. And later, when it comes time to executing the work, with all of that good information in hand, your crew can start to execute more on their own, which ends up freeing up more time for you to focus on running, the business as opposed to doing the work. And so I think it's kind of a cycle that you just have to force yourself into with some block time. And the better you get at estimating, the more time you're going to have later to do more pricing, selling, and managing of the business.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. And there was just one last one that had come through. We had a question here. Someone has seen the information on the estimating marketplace, but wanted to know how they could get their suppliers into the system. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So the estimating marketplace is coming very soon, and we have some resources on the website for you to direct your suppliers to us to have them join up and have a live price list within the estimating software. We've sent you some emails with some links that you can sort of open and send on to your suppliers. You can also email us if you've got a list of suppliers that you'd like us to focus on, or you can always reach out to your customer success manager, and they can kind of take that list and pass it on to our team to reach out to them as well. But truthfully, I think the most effective way to get your suppliers on our system is to talk to them, let them know that there's a big opportunity for them, because they'll have hundreds of companies in their market looking at their products and pricing live in the estimating platform, which is, kind of going to drive more new business their way. So in addition to making things more efficient for you, it's going to drive new business for them with other contractors in their market.
That's terrific. That's everything today, Mark. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks again, and we'll be back next week with another round of estimating. So thanks for joining.